Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's been a struggle. Hang on. Audio level's too high. I think that's a bit better, hopefully. Yes, good morning to everybody. Okay, before I get into saying good mornings, I pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land, the Whadjuk Noongar peoples. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to Aboriginal elders and peoples from other communities who may be taking part in this live stream today. Now, one person in particular, much audio, yes. I turned it down a little bit, Michael. Yes, Amanda. So, Amanda said, hi from hospital today. So, because you mentioned it, hopefully it's okay to acknowledge this. But yeah, I really hope you're doing okay. So Amanda then went on to say, had an autistic burnout last week and ended up in hospital. Wow. I really hope that you're doing okay. And to be watching this stream from hospital, I don't know quite what to make of that. Is it a bad thing? Good thing? I'm not sure. But let's start by saying hello to everybody. Also, Chip is here saying waking. Michael, some call it fun. Annie is here. Dave Paul Jones, good morning. Stephen W, Gavin, The Lane, Peter, Johnny, Sharky, David. Who else? Russell, Dodgy. Did I say hi to Dodgy? Morning, super peeps. Good morning, super person. And Simon, Keith H. Yes. Michael says, been a long time since I've had a burnout. Not a lot of fun. Look after yourself, Amanda. Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's a rough situation to be in. So what is everybody else saying at the moment? Everybody's just saying good morning. Peter said no audio. Oh, wait. Turns on speakers. All right. Now, I had a little list of things to cover today. A lot of stuff we covered last week, which was cool. We got through that big 3D printer discussion, which was interesting. And Plasma Steve is coming over this afternoon to talk about 3D printers, among other things. We've got a project that we're working on, a commercial project we're working on for a client, and we need to cover some things with that, but we're also going to be talking about 3D printers, and I am going to recommend to him that he goes for a Bamboo Labs P1P, because I think that is that is probably about the sweet spot at the moment for someone that is after a printer that they want to be reasonably serious about turning out good quality parts, but don't want to spend too much money on it, and also they don't want to project a printer that has to be constantly messed around with and tuned and those sorts of things. So the P1P looks like the real sweet spot. In the past, I probably would have said to go for something like a Prusa, but the P1P seems, just not having actually used one myself, it seems to have taken the spot of the Prusa as the go-to printer that you can plug it in. It's not quite an appliance, but it's pretty close. Yes. So, Peter Lawler says, Home Assistant has started showing I'm using negative electrical energy. If only I could convince my supplier it's correct and they're wrong. Yeah, so they can send you some money every month. That would be nice. So that reminds me, I was going to ask, so this can be a thing throughout the stream. What projects are you working on? I would really like to know what everybody is up to. It doesn't have to be something that you're actively working on right now. It could be something, whatever is something recent that you've been working on, I think. So speak up. And if you have links to your... oh yeah, Michael says it's technically possible with enough solar panels. Yes, that's right. So I think it's pretty common to, well, that's what the feed-in tariff is for. Build it. Oh, okay. This is one that Dodgy has been working on for a little while. Dodgy's project is building my remote control mower. And that is UPAS. Okay, we'll get back to that. So the remote control mower. Okay. Dodgy, yes. I've seen a few pictures that you've posted of this. I think you were doing some welding on the deck quite a while ago, like building the frame and the deck that everything attaches to. I saw pictures of that somewhere. It might have been in Discord, but that looks really, really cool. A little bit crazy. So I'd love to see some more of the progress of that. Tassie Bob says, putting the keys back on an Atari ST 1040 keyboard right now. Nice. The first, was it the first real computer? Not quite. One of the early, well, it kind of, okay. Some of the early Ataris, obviously they made game consoles. There was the Atari 2600, which was a game console, but nothing more. And then they sort of crossed over a little bit. There were things like the Atari 600, I think it was. There was an Atari 800, 800 XL. I'm stretching my memory back decades and decades. And when I was in primary school, I had a good friend whose name was also Jonathan, so we were the two Jonathans. His dad was a programmer, and this was back in like the late 70s, early 80s, and so he was very keen to expose my friend, so his son Jonathan, to computers, and they got an Atari 2600 when it first came out as a game console. And then, because it was just a game console, I don't know what he actually did, because I was, obviously in primary school, but somehow he got rid of that, whether he sold it or returned it or whatever. And they got an Atari, I think it was an Atari 800, because there was an Atari 400 and an Atari 800, so that it could be used not just for playing games, but for actually programming. And we spent a lot of time doing programming on the Atari 800. So yeah, the ST 1040 I think came out a little bit after that, and that was like one of those dream machines. You look at the ST 1040 and it was, ooh, fancy. Dave Paul Jones says UPAS since 2014. What is UPAS? Is that a university? I'm just going to search for UPAS. A tropical Asian tree, the milky sap of which has been used as arrow poison and for ritual purposes. Okay, so is that what you have been doing since 2014, David Paul Jones? I assume that is not the UPAS of which you speak. Alexi, you made it. Good morning. Stephen says, making an NFC-capable card reader to integrate with Apple and Android Wallet. Ah, okay. So making an NFC-capable card reader, that's an interesting one, because it's obviously a fair bit more work than just something like an RFID reader. I've made RFID readers in the past, to the extent of like winding my own coils and making the whole circuit. But doing that for basic RFID is pretty simple. Doing it for NFC, my guess is that takes a whole lot more work. I've never even looked into what's involved in that. Imi says, Chip and I are currently working on breakfast. Yeah, so that's your current project. I got in here. I was here till, it was nearly 2 a.m. last night / this morning. And I don't even know why. I was working on things, doing stuff, and it was one of those things where I just kept going and going and going, and then at some point thought, I'm either going to stay here all night, or I need to go back and sleep for a couple of hours, or I'm going to be screwed trying to do the stream in the morning. So I went home and slept for a few hours. You can probably see it in my eyes. And yes, this is chasing a squirrel. But the upshot of all of this is that I got in here this morning and realized that I was almost out of milk. So I've had minimal breakfast. I've had Okay, I've had breakfast, but I haven't had second breakfast, which is not good. I should have been onto second breakfast by now. Oh, Kim S says, finally putting items on my Tindy store. So, Kim, you have a Tindy store? Would you care to share what sort of items do you have on your Tindy store? We can do a promo, do a shout out to your Tindy store. If you just give me the name of the store, you won't be able to post a URL in the comments, but if you give the name of the Tindy store, I can do a quick search for it and maybe do a shout out to it, show people where it is. But I'm interested to know, Kim S, what products are you putting in your Tindy store? Simon, I am way behind on the chat, as you can tell. Way, way behind, which is great in this case because it's people dropping projects. Simon says, my day job is writing software for satellites. Awesome. Departing for space next Tuesday. What? Wow, you got a launch on Tuesday. What launch is happening next Tuesday? I could probably look that up, but I won't stop and do that right now. So, Simon, if you can talk about it, what particular part of the satellite are you writing software for? I would really like to know. And also what sort of satellite? It's software approaches to things change so fast, and it's been so long since I've looked at any of the satellite related stuff. So there was, I just thought I heard someone at my door, but no, it must have just been the wind. Yeah, so things that I was vaguely familiar with like 10 years ago, probably not even relevant anymore, but I would like to know more. That is cool. Frank says, a small solar shed install. Handy. I've never versus Creality K1. Okay. Creality K1. Okay, this is going to be, I'm going to defer this, but I'm opening it in a browser for later. I'll get back to that, Gavin's thing. So, small solar shed install. I have never, ever done any solar stuff, other than, playing around with little, the little toy solar panels and things that you get in toys and that sort of stuff, but not actual like domestic solar installation. I've never done anything with that at all. Never lived in a house with solar. It's just one of those things that I don't know why. It's probably the capital expense that has prevented me playing around with that sort of thing. But Frank, I hope that's going well. So this comment that I will come back to, Gavin said, discussing with the guys at CAD 3D, comparing Bamboo Labs versus Creality K1. K1 has better motors and similar speed and price point. Okay, that's interesting. I have opened a tab to remind myself to come back to that in a minute. But for now, I'm going to continue. Austin says, running a little late but arrived. You made it here. Welcome, Austin. So Austin, the reason that everybody is posting these little things is I asked people to post what projects they're working on at the moment. And I know you are working on a bunch of things at the moment, so you can speak up and mention them here. You've even been live streaming the assembly. So for anyone who is interested, you'll see Austin's creations in the chat. And I think from the chat you can go to his profile. But in any case, if you go to Austin's creations on YouTube, he regularly does live streams, many hour-long live streams of assembling prototypes and working on his projects. So if that's the sort of thing that you're into, check it out. Stranger Jonah says, I'm trying to build a push-button Zigbee light switch that will still turn on the lights with a relay, but also be able to be turned on at the switch and potentially allow long press, double press, etc. Interesting. Firstly, Stranger Jonah, I don't think I've ever seen you in the chat here before, so welcome. Welcome, stranger. So a push button Zigbee light switch that will still turn on the lights with a relay, but also be able to be turned on at the switch. Okay, so is this... I'm trying to understand quite what the requirements are here. So is this a situation where you have your Zigbee light switch and an existing light switch and you want both of them to be able to work, or is it replacing the existing light switch? Because those two are very, very different situations. And one of the big challenges, of course, with home automation or with any kind of complex interconnected system is that the more complexity you add, the more points of failure you have. And the big issue with things like smart light switches is if the light switch fails, then you can't turn your lights on and off. So a lot of people are really worried about that and have some kind of an electrical override where it's possible to close the circuit using, just a standard electromechanical switch to do things like turn lights on and off even if the automation system is not working. Yes, but that is a harder problem to solve than it sounds. Michael says, I was the fourth Michael in my grade 2 class in Queensland. So you had many Michaels. I'm sure you would have had some way of disambiguating, like, sorry, I just saw, so you would have been Michael W or something like that. Andrew says, just a mailbox monitor and notifier. All right, that's a good project. I like that sort of project. That's, I did a mailbox notifier a long, long time ago. It was one of the early home automation projects I did. And it was a project that I used as an example when I was doing conference talks and things for a long time, because it's conceptually, it's an interesting way of explaining some of the benefits of home automation, or not really home automation, more IoT and adding sensors to things and notifications on things. It's the classic thing of, so the way I describe it is that if you've got a mailbox, a regular mailbox, it is a poled interface. You don't know if there's anything in it. You have to go to it and have a look and see if there's anything in it. Oh, no mail. Okay, go back, wait a while longer, go back out, check it again. So you are polling it until there is something in it. Whereas if you add a sensor on it with a notification, it becomes an interrupt. So you can just totally ignore the mailbox, not even think about it, and then eventually at some point something will be put in. Oh, I've got to deal with that now. So it's converting your mailbox from a poled interface to an interrupt. So, yeah, I like that. It's a good project. So I'm also curious to know what sort of sensor you were using, because that was one thing that screwed me up. I thought it was going to be a really simple project, and it turned out to be harder than I expected. And also, this was back before the days of ESPs and things when I was doing it. So I actually ran Ethernet out to my letterbox. We were doing landscaping out the front at the time and putting in a new front path, a path from the front door. So there was a brick path, and well, we put in a brick path. It didn't exist. So what happened was that when I dug out the location where the path was going to go, I buried conduit under it, and I ran power and Ethernet out to the front gate, and then used Ethernet for the notifier. But the challenge that I found was my idea of putting a switch on the flap that the mail goes through didn't work, because if there was just something like a single letter being pushed through the flap, it would barely move, and then the switch wouldn't be triggered. So I ended up messing around with different types of sensors. Like I put a switch in the bottom with a plate so that if something came into it, then it would sit on it and then trigger the switch. But then that was very sensitive on weight. You'd have to get it so that it would be triggered by something light like a letter. So that was a bit of a pain. I couldn't get that to work reliably. And this was, you know, cheap and easy access to things like ultrasonic sensors and infrared range finders like time of flight sensors and all of those sorts of things. So I was trying to do mechanical methods to detect it and went through a few different things, and then ended up with eventually I used an ultrasonic sensor and that worked much better. But I'm curious to know what people are using for it. Stranger Jonah says Amiga 500 for the win. Peter says Amiga greater than Atari ST, fight me. Well, I'm sure it was. Yes. It was just what I was exposed to. Talking about UPAS, Michael says UPAS could be University of Tasmania. Yes. I wonder if University of Tasmania. Matt is here too. Good morning, Matt. David says, I'm currently clearing my table full of part-finished projects as a landlord inspection is due this week. Oh, what, and they don't appreciate all the projects sitting out on the bench? What? That should be increasing the property value. Okay, so... this is... Alright, this is a callback to the thing earlier about Stephen working on the NFC reader. Stephen says the coil for 13.56 is actually much simpler than 125K. So this is 13.56 megahertz. This is much simpler than 125 kilohertz. Took it as an excuse to pick up a Flipper Zero too. Yeah, Flipper Zero would be very useful for that sort of thing. So the obviously 13.56 megahertz is a bigger number than 125 kilohertz, and higher frequency means shorter wavelength, which means I guess the coil is smaller. Does it have fewer turns? I'm not sure. I didn't have any particular problems with making coils for 125. Well, I was making them for 134.2 kilohertz, but it's, yeah, it's basically the same thing. Yeah, it was just some, like, yeah, inductor wire wrapped around a former many times. Kind of boring, but it's all right. James, yes, you made it. You made it. Oh, and Don S made it as well. Oh, Simon says SpaceX can't really talk about details. Okay, that's understandable. But yes, space stuff does tend to be very secretive, but still it is super cool. I'm pumped for you. And I'm glad you got a launch next week. That's really exciting. That's one of those surreal moments. It's the only way to describe it. Keith says, busy printing boxes with my Neptune 3 Pro. I don't think I've ever heard of a Neptune 3 Pro. Neptune 3 Pro. Oh, it's an Elegoo. Okay, yeah, I've heard of the Elegoo printers. I just haven't heard of that particular model. This one, the Elegoo Neptune 3 Pro. Yeah, cool. So that's the 230 bucks. That's so cheap. No. Go away, you pop-ups. So that is, oh, it's a funky looking enclosure on it. They've gone to a bit of trouble to put plastic enclosures and things around different parts of this. Yeah, that looks like quite an interesting printer for that sort of price. Neptune 3 Pro, quiet printing, cap touchscreen. How do they do a controller with a cap touchscreen for that price? Dual lead screw drive, auto bed leveling, PEI magnetic platform. Wow, this looks like on a par with the Prusa, like say maybe the Mark III's, but with a better controller for $230. So cheap, so cheap. Chip says breakfast is still my project. Don, you made it from New Zealand. Thank you for coming across to the West Island to visit us, to visit me. Austin says, always fun stuff on my bench, even more so when I have clients. Right. Dave says, I created a solution looking for a problem. What was that in relation to? Created a UPAS since 2014. Maybe there's more explanation further down in the further down in the chat. Chip asked dropouts. I don't know. I haven't got any notifications on the YouTube console. Sorry, just scrolling through comments, because every now and then I'm way behind on the chat, and every now and then I move it and it jumps to the end of the chat, and then I have to scroll back and find where I was up to. So Michael Wise said I was referring to disambiguation at primary school. Michael says, correct, I was W, right? We'll just call you W from now on. Okay, so Stranger Jonah says, first time live watcher, long time stalker of your videos. Welcome, stalker. And yes, basically replacing the toggle switch with a momentary switch. The ZB Mini will do this, but not with a momentary switch. Okay. So replacing, yes, with a momentary switch. Cool. Johan says, I've done an AC condensed water level control with a VL53 L4 CD time of flight distance sensor and drain pump. MQTT to Node Red to Home Assistant. Working great. That's awesome. Yeah, that is awesome. So, water level control. So, a time of flight sensor, drain pump. Right, okay, so I'm pretty sure I can interpret what that means. I've had this issue before. So with an air conditioning system, typically what happens is that you get water condensing out of the air as the cooling is running, because when you take air and you cool it, it can no longer hold as much moisture, and therefore some of the moisture that's in it condenses, and that's how we get rain. And so when you're running an air conditioning system, you're effectively making like a little cloud, with like a rain cloud inside your house, and at the point of the heat exchanger, like on the inside. And that means that you end up with condensation, and that has to go somewhere. And usually people who install air conditioning systems will attempt to put it in a place where they can run a drain hose that goes from the bottom of the head unit going out through the wall or somewhere outside, and then all of the condensation just runs out through the hose and drips outside. But there are situations where you can't do that, and we actually had this at IVT, in the office at IVT, because we put air conditioning in, and this was in the server room. So we had a server room that was essentially in the middle of the building. It wasn't touching any exterior walls at all. There were basically glass walls all around it, and we wanted air conditioning going into it. So we had a head unit in the room, and we had to get all of the water out that was condensing into it, and we needed to take it up and dump it out onto the roof, so that it would then go out, just run down the roof and out be collected with all the rainwater, etc. So the installer put essentially put a pump in the bottom of the air conditioning unit, so that water would condense. It would go into the catchment area at the bottom, and then the pump would run, and it would pump it up onto the roof instead of having it running out through a drain hose. I am taking a really long time to describe a very simple thing. It's the way I do things. So the pump would detect when the water level had got to a certain point. It would run for a while, empty it, or mostly empty it, and then it would turn itself off. So it sounds like that is what Johan is working on. So a water level control using a VL53 L4CD. Let's check that one out. VL53, so that's a laser time of flight sensor, I think, or infrared, probably infrared. L4CD. Oh yeah, it's one of the STM ones. So yeah, I've used these before. The ST, maybe not this particular model, I can't remember, but I have used these sorts of, I've used these ST time of flight sensors before. Yes, very, very interesting. So it's quite a small chip. In that picture it looks big, but it's actually a small chip with two holes in the top. And I think one of them is the emitter and the other one is the receiver. So it, how does it describe itself? Like all time of flight TOF sensors based on ST's flight sense technology, the BLA records an absolute distance measurement regardless of the target color and reflectance. Housed in a miniature reflowable package which integrates an SPAD single photon avalanche diode. That sounds so cool. Array, the V4, I'm going to zoom this in. Wait, why did it suddenly get smaller again? I don't know. Achieves the best ranging performance in various ambient lighting conditions and for a wide range of cover glass materials. Integrates a vertical cavity surface emitting laser. How the hell does that work? It emits a fully invisible 940 nanometer infrared light that is totally safe for eyes, Class 1 certification. So essentially, one of these holes, whichever one, is a very low power laser emitter. And then the other one is a sensor array. So it shoots out a laser, which then reflects off whatever is in front of it, and it's detected by the receiver. And then it can tell based on how long did it take for that laser to reach there and bounce back, and it can calculate the distance. It is bonkers that these things even work. It blows my mind. How, look at this. It'll measure distances from 1 millimeter to 1,300 millimeters with a ranging speed of 100 hertz. So 100 times a second, you can get a distance, you can measure a distance between 1 millimeter and 1.3 meters in a little thing that is, and these things are small too, they're not that big. Where are the dimensions? Here we go, 4.4 by 2.4 millimeters, and it's 1 millimeter thick. That is a funky little device. They're not super cheap, but then what do you expect for what they can do? Yeah, I love these things. These little laser rangefinders are so cool. They are awesome. Mostly just because I don't believe that they can work. I reckon that this is based on alien technology. It's proof that we've been visited by aliens. No, I don't really believe that. I'm taking the piss. But yeah, when this sort of thing, I can understand conceptually how this works. I mean, shoots out a laser, counts until the laser comes back, detects how long it's taken, calculates the time. Like, conceptually, I can follow how that works. But in practice, the concept of designing something like this and making it so that it actually works, and then selling it for a few dollars, that is mind-blowing. That shows that we are living in a magical wonderland of incredibleness. Like anybody that that wishes we lived in a world with magic, we do. We have magic. It's just that it's in the form of technology. It's beyond understanding. Oh, so good. Why am I so excited about this? Oh yeah, and then so Stranger Jonah said, and this is in relation to the light switch, and of course I get an electrician to install it. Good old Victorian laws, am I right? Yes. Oh. Oh, there are multiple people saying dropouts. Okay, so it wasn't just chip, it was something actually going on. Stephen said, this is in reply to Stranger Jonah, I used the Fabaro dimmer 2 previously and it supports a momentary switch for on-off dimming control. Oh, right. Okay. That's interesting. Sorry, I just lost my place in the chat again. What I need to do is make my chat window much, much bigger so that I can see more of it, and then maybe I won't have this problem so much. Almost found where I was. Okay. Oh. Harvard GJ says, hi there, greetings from Norway. Thank you for coming from Norway. It's a long way to come to watch a live stream. I blame my home automation addiction on you after I bought your book Practical Arduino back in 2009. Wow. It's a deep rabbit hole, I tell you. Yeah, it is. Oh, thank you for buying the book. That was a lot of fun writing that book. It was hard work. There was just so much to do. Oh, every chapter of that was like a like diving down a rabbit hole and trying to figure out what were the relevant parts to include and to explain, and what was the message in each chapter, like what techniques could be taught. It was tough. And you can tell that if you look at the structure of the book, you can see that towards the end, my inhibitions kind of went away and I fully gave in to my chase all of the squirrels tendencies, because that final project, that vehicle telemetry data logger thing, a Majigami project, which incorporated OBD2 and GPS and an SD card writer, so it would write log files and had a display on it and buttons for a menu. It was, all of the projects up until that point were reasonably sensible and constrained. And then with that one, by the time I got to it, that was actually the last one that I wrote up. So I wrote up projects as I was going. And the order that they appear in the book is not necessarily the order I did them in, but the last one that I wrote up was the vehicle telemetry system. And if you look at the page count, it's, how many projects are in it? I can't remember how many projects are in the book. It was probably like 10 or 12 or something. And the last project is like a quarter of the entire book. Because I just couldn't help myself. There's so many interesting avenues to go down. It could have been many different sub-projects, but it all just got merged into one big one, showing lots of different techniques. Right. Oh, Johnny says, UPAS number 3. I don't know if I want to click that. Johnny, is it safe to click? Hang on, I'm going to hit mute. And I am going to open the link that you have given in a window that is off the screen, just so that I can see if you're UPAS 3, adding speech recognition to the UI. Oh, perimeter access UPAS. Oh, this is the project. Okay, cool. UPAS number 3. I'm gonna bring this back up here. So, Dave Paul Jones, this is the project. Installed engines, UPAS. Joey says, wow, when will this be available for purchase? Please give us details. And that was 3 years ago. So hopefully I don't get copyright strikes for this. Hang on, I'm going to unmute. What is...
Hello, it was a bit of an update.
I don't think I'm going to play this whole video, but I just wanted to...
Here we go.
I'm just going to jump through a little bit. And the URL for this, Johnny has already put in the chat, so I don't need to repost it. But yeah, look at this. This is cool. Installed engines, Sonoff, Basic V1, Sonoff Basic V1. I don't understand what this project is about, but it looks pretty awesome. Are these virtual or real rack? Okay, it's like virtual rack devices. Okay, I am going to be checking this out later on. Oh, hang on. Here's a real thing. Ultra Connect V1.
UPass ping 1-2. UPass open 1-2. UPass open 1-2.
That's voice control.
UPass close 1-2.
Being demonstrated. All right, I got to check that project out. Thanks for that that link, Johnny, to Dave Paul Jones's project. Maybe I've heard about this before. I don't know. I don't remember it, but it looks pretty cool. So I'm going to, yeah, I'm going to look at that later. Oh, Dodgy asked, this is in relation to the letterbox detection project. Would some kind of seesaw have worked? Could use mechanical leverage, perhaps. Yeah, so some kind of seesaw, if there was a bit more room. What I was trying to do when I was messing around with the switch in the bottom, I had a micro switch and an extension on it so that there was some mechanical advantage. When a letter fell on it, then it would push down the micro switch. But it just ended up being a bit of messing around. Like the mechanical, trying to tune it mechanically, it just became annoying. And what I really wanted to do was go for more like a solid state type solution. Technically, is our ultrasonic solid state? Probably not, because there are moving parts in the transducers. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Peter says, okay, this is getting back to the Atari versus Amiga comments earlier. Peter says, serious Atari 512 1040 ST talk. Without Atari going bust, good music authoring software would not have been ported to the Mac and ending up in music studios. Both were 68K. Yeah. So the, actually I know they were Motorola. Was the 1040 and the 512 a 68,000 processor? Because the Atari 800 was a Motorola 6800. I'm reasonably sure. So that was the first processor that I ever did anything on, which was around the same time that I started getting interested in the Z80 as well. But I didn't have one of those yet. It took me a long time before I owned any of my own stuff. So the Atari 800 of my friends that I was playing on was the only computer that I actually got to be hands-on with for a while. Right, so yes, music studios, recording studios were very much a Mac, yes, the land of Mac for a very long time. I don't know if that's still the case. It probably is. I don't know. Kind of like the way Mac is still considered to be the platform of choice for graphic designers. Maybe, but obviously you can run Photoshop, etc. on Windows as well. So there isn't anymore the situation where it's like this is the platform that you have to have because that's the only platform the tools run on. Now you can run the tools on anything, but there's probably still the tradition and the inertia that recording studios are predominantly Mac. That's just my guess, not knowing anything about the industry. Oh, Def Pom, you made it along. G'day. Oh yeah, and then Peter goes on to say, and from the music studios, the Mac moved out further into home music creators and became far more popular than what it was originally. Atari's demise was Apple's win. Haha, getting back into the history of computing here. Oh, David, this is talking about the letterbox sensor. David says, I built a mailbox sensor with a Zigbee door sensor with a micro switch with a long springy arm for the slot sensor. Yes. Cool. Yeah, if you're doing it with something like a Zigbee module or yeah, like one of those Zigbee door sensors would be definitely the way to do it now, not running Ethernet all the way out there like I did. And yeah, with a micro switch with a springy arm for the slot sensor. That was what I tried to do, and my mechanical skills failed me. Oh, Graham says, I also am a Victorian. I use a 4-button Tuya type Zigbee switches, blue tack to the wall to trigger Home Assistant to turn on off Wi-Fi lights using Tuya Local. The light switch is unchanged. Okay, so Zigbee light switches to trigger Home Assistant to turn on off Wi-Fi lights. Okay, right. So the lights are Wi-Fi, which means that you're leaving them turned on and powered up, and then just sending commands to them to turn them on or off. Right. So in that situation, you wouldn't use the light switch in normal day-to-day use. Like the old light switch you wouldn't use, you'd use the Zigbee light switch, I guess, because once you've turned them off, there's no longer power on the light and you can't turn it on using Wi-Fi. Oh, Andrew says, this is about the letterbox thing. Currently thinking magnetic reed switch with the layout of the mailbox and flap. I think I'll be able to get the magnet far enough away from the switch, even with thin things. LoRaWAN for connectivity. Right. Yeah, LoRaWAN. LoRaWAN. I want to play with it. Oh, frustrating. It's one of those things that I just want to be messing around with, and I've got too many other things to do. I will get to LoRaWAN. I will. I promise. Yeah. So the problem I had was that the letterbox had a vertical slot on it with a flap that would, when you push the letter in, the flap would open slightly. But the problem is that with a thin letter, how thick is a letter? A couple of pieces of paper. It's like a millimeter, 1.5 millimeters. And if the postie slid that in, the flap would barely move. So it wouldn't move enough to either trigger a mechanical switch or a reed switch with a magnet. But yeah, I hope that totally depends on the geometry of the letterbox. So if there's a way to make that work, fantastic. Austin says, now that I'm at my keyboard, my main project has been building a custom inventory management system for a client and currently doing testing and revisions on PCBs. Yeah, so one thing that I find really interesting about Austin's approach is modular development. And so the reason I'm pausing is this could be a long rabbit hole to go down. So I don't want to go too deep into it. But I think it's interesting. Conceptually, the way I typically go about building new things is that I do the classic thing of do a quick proof of concept with an off-the-shelf microcontroller board and modules or whatever I need to hack into it or wire into it to make it work. That might be something like some kind of a sensor connected over I2C. There might be a motor driver with some digital pins or something to control it. There might be like just an ESP32 board or an Arduino or something as a starting point, and then plug those modules together, and in the space of a fairly short time, like a couple of hours or whatever, has something that kind of works, just to see if you can make the concept work. And then from there, go to a custom PCB. And the circuit that ends up on the PCB may not be exactly the same as the circuit that was cobbled together from the modules. It might be that you use a different motor driver, or you use a different processor entirely, or something like that. It can deviate. It's just that you're taking the proof of concept and going the next step and building an integrated circuit board that incorporates all of those things. So I tend to jump directly from the proof of concept modules wired together with jumper wires to a single integrated PCB. And perhaps this is because the projects that I work on are relatively simple. I can take that jump in one move. One thing that I've noticed that Austin does is create an intermediate step, which is design custom PCBs that are never actually intended to be the final thing. It's not jumping to, okay, I am now going to design the PCB for everything integrated. Quite often what Austin will do is design a PCB which is a subsection of the project, and then be able to test that in isolation and make sure that part of it is working. And that is that's an approach that I haven't used, but I find it really interesting. And since I noticed Austin doing it, like I noticed it quite a long time ago, it's crossed my mind a few times about maybe the circumstances in which that can be useful, and being able to break out a section of the circuit and implement just that section without the rest of it. So yeah, I've noticed Austin doing that for things like battery management. So building a battery management board which is not intended to be a final thing. It's okay, I'm going to build this battery management part of the circuit on a board and test it, and then if that works, it'll end up integrated into the other thing. So anyway, I don't want to speak for Austin. I might be misrepresenting his approach. I'm just making observations of what I've noticed as I've been watching him working on projects over time. So yeah, maybe Austin has more thoughts on that. And perhaps sometime Austin will be back on the stream and we can talk about all sorts of things like that. All right, so now talking about Austin and his projects reminds me of something that I am going to bring up in a minute. In fact, I'm going to add another tab for myself. LMR here, if anyone is wanting to jump ahead, you can do it. I'm going to bring this back up. I've got the tab to remind me. You can look up LMR 38010 and be amazed. Amazed if you're into voltage regulators. And yes, I'm into voltage regulators. And I know that that Austin has been into voltage regulators as well. So that's why it reminded me. I will get back to that. It could be my new favorite voltage regulator to replace the LM blah blah blahs. Where are we? I've lost my spot in the chat again. That's right. I was reading Austin's comment about. Okay. Here we go. Oh, Dodgy. Sorry, I missed. What was now the recommended default printer? What was it? Well, I was about to say the Bamboo Labs P1P, which is, I will put that up, no, not this one. This is the X1. It just came up in my history. 3D printers. This one here. This is the one. Well, the one that everybody is raving about is this one, the X1 Carbon. So Bamboo Labs X1 Carbon is a freakishly good printer from what I've heard, but it's like $2,500, you know, in that sort of ballpark, Australian. And the same company also makes the P1P, which is a very similar thing, but it is much cheaper. Like, it's down in the price range of a Prusa, I think just over $1,000. But it's a fully enclosed printer, and it seems to be it's one of those cases where it's half the price of the X1 Carbon, but like 80% is good. So it seems to be a really good one in terms of plug it in, and it's almost like a it's almost like an appliance. So that is the one that is looking really intriguing at the moment. But now that the Creality K1 has been pointed out as well, I am going to stick this one also up here in this tab collection for later. All right, and then minimize them. Where are we? Yeah, where are we? Okay, that's right. So Austin said, also did some WT32 screen hacking for running a newer Ethernet PoE shield, plus supporting the WT32S386V as well as the plus screen. Oh, cool. Yes, Austin always has good stuff going on. For running a newer Ethernet PoE shield. I would like to know more about that, please, Austin. Oh, okay, so this is getting back to the making your own NFC reader. Stephen says, with 13.56 megahertz, you can do the antenna entirely on the PCB. 3 to 4 loops with the appropriate matching capacitors, resistors, width, spacing to tune the frequency and filter the signal. Yes, okay, I can see how that makes it much easier. So, yeah, just design your coil on your PCB. Beautiful. No more making up a little thing and using a counter and spinning it like in a drill to wind the coil onto it, like I had to do. Yeah, much better. Oh, the reason I was just smoking then is Tassie Bob made a comment which was a throwback to the air conditioner drain thing. He says, so much fun when the drain gets blocked or it has to be pumped and the pump fails. Right. Defpom says, it's quite common to install a collection pump on the bottom of the aircon to push it out. John S. says, best practice is to use a separate high-level sensor to alarm, no common mode failure. Are these is this chat all from... There's a whole collection here of comments about... I wish there were timestamps in these chat things. That's the only thing. These are all talking about AC, which I was talking about like 20 minutes ago. Am I that far behind in the chat? Stephen says you can also get the same pump sump units for toilets, so you don't have to dig up the floor for plumbing. They also include a macerator to deal with breaking up solid waste. Yes. Yeah, I've heard about those as well. Yeah, like if you're putting a toilet in a basement, for example, or like on a concrete slab, and you can't go down to get to the sewage. You have to go up. Then there are systems that can deal with that as well. Johnny says, we use the VL53L series in commercial products. They're great. Where are we? Okay, Defpom says, earlier this year I built a letterbox sensor. It emails me when the mailbox is opened, runs off a single 18650, has been running for about 4 months so far, and the battery is only down to 3.8 volts. Nice. So, DEFPOM, I'm curious what you're using. If you're running a single 18650, it's been running for 4 months, you're obviously not running something like an ESP32 at full bore with Wi-Fi turned on. Yeah, you've obviously engineered it for minimal power usage. So I'm curious to know how your sensor is working, what sort of communications it's using. Is it using LoRaWAN or Zigbee or whatever? Delane asked, speaking of books, when is the next one? I have thought about that many, many times. When is the next one? I've actually started writing a couple of other books. A few years ago, I started writing a book on Lego and it was Lego and Arduino projects combined. So like smart Lego, but then circumstances. I had a publisher for that. Actually had a publishing deal to do it, but then it was at the point where I just couldn't follow through and complete it. The time commitment on writing a book is enormous, so I bailed on that. And I also started writing a sequel to Practical Arduino. It was going to be called Connected Arduino, and the idea was to cover all of the different methods of communication. So both like on the idea was to explain how different communication systems worked, and it would be obvious things like how to connect Wi-Fi and Ethernet for longer range communication, but also on PCB communication, like explaining I2C, SPI, and other things like serial comms, RS422, that sort of thing. And so the idea was that it would cover different projects that would all incorporate some form of communication and how that worked. So that if you were building IoT type devices, you could use the appropriate communication method for whatever your project is. And I actually started writing that one, and O'Reilly were interested in that as a sequel to Practical Arduino, but that was a few years ago. And as I was in the process of kind of putting that, in the early stages of that, was around when the ESP8266 suddenly arrived on the scene and everything changed, and I could just see that within a couple of years, Arduino, the classic Arduino, like AVR type boards, would be irrelevant. And so things like how do you connect an AT Mega to Ethernet, like nobody would care anymore. It would all just be next generation processors. So yeah, so I didn't go ahead with that one either. Trady says you'd need an IR sensor for letterbox automation. Yeah. Core. Core Electronics was here with a retracted message. I missed whatever that message was. Michael says, has a programming Z80 book on the shelf for assembler. So DEFPOM, where were we? Right, okay, so DEFPOM says, yes, uses an ESP32, connects to my Wi-Fi and emails me, then kills its own power again afterwards, so no sleep power is being consumed at all. Nice! That is really cool. So how are you powering it up is the question. So, all right, my guess, probably wrong, but I'm going to guess, is that you have some kind of a sensor that closes a latching power circuit. So when when a letter arrives in the letterbox, it trips the sensor, which could be mechanical, I don't know, latches on the power circuit, which starts up the ESP32, which then connects to Wi-Fi, which sends a notification, and then it sends a signal to the latching power circuit and turns itself back off again. Is that the way you solve the problem? I hope it is, because that would be really, really cool. yeah, so Peter said, I predict a day in the future. Oh, this is opening up something. I predict a day in the future when no light switches will be installed into a home. Yes and no. I have seen firsthand an attempt to do this. So this was quite some years ago at Steve Outram's house. So some of you may remember Sausage Software, the company from back in the, where was it, late 90s, that was doing, they did Hotdog, the HTML editor, and basically were one of the really big early internet companies. Like, it was an Australian success story, listed on the stock exchange. Youngest, what was it? Steve's claim to fame was something like the youngest CEO of a publicly listed company in Australian history. And so he had a house which well, he sold it quite a few years ago, so I can at least tell you the suburb it was in. It was in Wonga Park, and it was the biggest property in, like, the biggest domestic residential property in metropolitan Melbourne. I think it was around 600 acres or 500 acres, but inside metropolitan Melbourne. And so his house, he stated, like, one of his rules was he didn't want a single light switch in the entire house. He wanted everything automated. And so many very smart people worked for many years trying to make that work and failed. It's a remarkably hard problem not having any control surfaces. Yes, you can make a house that has motion detectors, and when you walk into a room the lights turn on, and then after you've walked out a few minutes later the lights turn off. And that sounds like a simple problem, and it's not. It turns out to have so many like edge cases and weird things that happen that you end up spending. So yes, you can solve the 80% of the problem really easily, but then you will spend the rest of your life chasing the diminishing parts of the problem that become quite a challenge. Yeah, so where are we? Where are we? Okay, so Peter, in principle, I agree. That would be nice. And in fact, this was the dream. In fact, I own a domain. In fact, I wonder if I still own it. I better check this before I say what it is. All right. I'm just going to run a quick who is to make sure that, yes, I do still own it. That's good. So I registered the domain name quite some years ago, Ambient IQ. I think it must be like 10 years ago, because this was, it was around the time of beginning Superhouse. So the whole idea of Ambient IQ, in fact, this was when I was writing Practical Arduino, which makes it 15 years ago. The whole idea was that your environment should be intelligent, and it should, so the reason that I was calling it Ambient IQ is that it is in the fabric of everything around you, and a room should be smart to some extent. It should adapt to you and react to what you're doing and predict your needs by doing things like setting the light level appropriately. I just heard a sound out the back, which was Lachlan opening the door, which reminds me there is something super important that I've got to talk to you about before the end of this live stream. So remind me. Okay, 2 keywords. Robot, chainsaw. I will come back to that. So you got to remind me if I forget, but I don't want to get off this other subject that Peter has raised, which is really important, and it's actually on topic for this channel, which is amazing. So, so Peter, I 100% agree with you that ideally what we want is for the fabric of the world around us to be adaptive and to sense what's going on and for things to just do what they should. And this was a topic of a conference talk that I did a long time ago called Use the Force, Linus, which was all about taking the concept of the best user interface is no user interface and applying that to automation. Being able to do things like use gestures to open things, to like open curtains and all of that sort of stuff. The challenge is making it work and covering those little edge cases. They can really trip you up. Yeah. Where are we? I'm jumping back in the chat. Okay, so Michael says, my garage door sends me a Slack message when it opens and closes by way of a reed switch. Yeah, that's cool. That can be, I don't know how this happened, but a couple of years ago, I think there have been 2 occasions where at some point I've discovered the garage door is open and not known how long it's been open, why it was open. It was just open. And I don't know, like, I've never been able to figure out if it was a case of someone in the family opened the garage door and then just forgot to close it. Could have been me. I don't know. You all know how bad my brain is. Or if there was some kind of a glitch and the garage mechanism activated. But it was one of those things where, you get up in the morning and go out the front door and out the gate and out to the car, parked in the street, not parked in the garage because the garage is full of stuff, but go out into the street and then you look back at the house and think, why is the garage door open? How long has it been open? Has that been open all night? I don't know. So having some kind of an indicator of when the garage door is open is useful. And also in the house, the garage door is at the far end from the kitchen and you can't hear when it opens or closes or anything, so you wouldn't even know. Trady says, best thing for Laura I thought of was to track my dog. Yeah, so that means, okay, so to track something you need location services, which means most of the time you need GPS. You can do some kind of location tracking using Wi-Fi, but then you need connectivity still. So you need, if you can do basic location tracking by looking at the MAC addresses of the Wi-Fi access points around you. Even if you can't connect to them, you can still get their MAC addresses. That's just like the way Wi-Fi works at the lowest level. In order to initiate a connection to a device, the bottom level protocol needs to begin its negotiation and they need a way to identify themselves. And there are databases around the place that list the geographic locations of MAC addresses of wireless access points. And also they typically just broadcast their name. So even without GPS, it is possible a lot of the time to figure out your location simply on the basis of what Wi-Fi networks you can see nearby. And then you can look up the location of those Wi-Fi networks and go, ooh, I am somewhere in the region of these networks. But then in order to do that lookup, you need connectivity, like mobile connectivity or whatever else. So yes, probably the simplest way to do it would be to stick GPS on it. but then that's power hungry. Yeah, so dog tracking is a useful and good thing, but it is also one of those things that is a harder problem than you would think. So, oh, okay. So Austin says we could always do a custom stream about mine and others' methods. Yeah, I think that would be interesting. We could get what would be interesting is to not just have me and Austin, but also to have someone who has maybe a different approach as well. I don't know how I'd even find someone with a different approach. But yeah, just talking about methods of going from concept to product. And there are many, many, many steps in the middle. But what I'm particularly talking about here is how you go from concept to proof of concept to, I'm not going to say production ready. More, it's beyond proof of concept because it's not just a few things connected together with jumper wires or quick connectors or whatever. It's an actual integrated board, but it may not yet be ready for manufacturing. It's more like an early stage or a beta type product, or something that's at the point where you can do some field testing. Tradies referring to something. Tradies made a very interesting comment here. It's referring back to something that Peter said. Switches. Okay. So I think this might be referring to the thing about light switches not being installed in homes. So Tradie says it has to be a design where if you were the designer and died, how would another person service it, in my humble opinion? Yep. That is... yeah, that is something I've talked about quite a bit in the past as well, and done an entire video on it, the preparing for death video. So Stephen says, install a buzzer on the dog and train it to return home when the buzzer goes off, trigger when the dog leaves response range of the LoRa signal. Ah, so you're relying on a Pavlovian response from the dog. Cool. Oh, and Austin says, saw someone do that with an AirTag. All right, so you could use the output of, use the AirTag so that when it goes outside of range, yeah, they do have a you left it behind sort of thing, don't they? But that's normally based on notifying through the phone. Anyway, oh, Defpom says, Tradie, did you see my LoRa projects? Using it for an event scoring system to talk to a web server, using a LoRa to Ethernet gateway I built too. You built a LoRa to Ethernet gateway? Defpom, I need to look into your project some more. That sounds very interesting. Yeah, so, where are we? Where are we? Oh, right. So, okay, I am trying to catch up. All right. Austin, okay, so this is talking about Austin's design approach. Austin says, yep, I don't like paying $300 for the manufacturer's breakout, and I like understanding their recommendations and ensuring I can make it work. Yeah, so that's a summary on... Oh, Amanda says you can turn on timestamps for the chat. What? What? Toggle timestamps. You can too. Amanda, thank you. All right, so now I know that I'm 20 minutes behind. I'm not just guessing that I'm 20 minutes behind. I had no idea you could do that. That's cool. All right, so yes, Austin, it is a test implementation. Yeah. I do like that approach. It's I just tend to jump straight to designing the final board. Steven says, The LMR38010 has a huge input voltage range. Yes, it does. I know, it's so good. All right, what's the time? 11:21. I really want to turbo through some of these comments because I want to talk about robots and chainsaws, and I want to talk about the LM38010. Okay, so DefPom says, for the Mailbox, I have a micro switch that enables power to the ESP32. The ESP holds its own power supply on, connects to Wi-Fi and emails me, then it turns its own power supply back off. Battery voltage is emailed. Nice. That is such a slick solution. That's nice, DefPom. I really like that. Dave Paul Jones said there's a newer project called UPAS Project Update T-Switch Intercom. I used LiDAR but couldn't get it to see through clear polycarb. Oh, okay. So the polycarb must have been blocking the particular wavelength of the light. Yeah, so that's one of the things that's interesting about different plastics is some plastics you can cut in a laser cutter depending on the wavelength of the laser cutter because it absorbs energy, and other things the laser can pass through it and won't be cut, which is why when you're doing things like cutting acrylic, and different colors can require different settings because they absorb the energy differently. What? James says, I made a battery-powered device to log diaper changes when my kid was born. I used a latching power circuit like John mentioned. The button latched power on, then I connected to Wi-Fi, logged, and then kill it. That's cool. Oh, and there's a link to Community Challenge. Was this actually, did you submit this? Yes. All right, hang on. I'm going to bring this up and put this up on here. Which button am I pressing? This one. The dirty smart button. So this is on the Element 14 blog. So diaper logger, wet, dirty, blowout. So you press the button. So it's an Arduino Pro Mini with an ESP01 Wi-Fi module. Okay, yeah, and power circuit, etc. Right. And James has already put the URL for that in the chat. So if anybody, yeah, Scott says everybody has to stop posting in the chat until he catches up. Thank you. Peter says ambient IQ is exactly what I'm talking about. Right. Where is Steve? Chip was asking where is Steve. I am really going into turbo mode now. Radar sensors are pretty dope. Didn't Adafruit hack the Xbox sensor first? It wasn't Adafruit, but they promoted it. It was done by a guy, what's his name? Oh, I can't remember. A Spanish guy. No, I can't remember. They put out I think what happened was that Lamore put out a challenge. So she said, she did some blog post where she was talking about the Xbox, what's the name of it? I've got a couple of them here. Yeah, they're LiDAR based sensors, saying the sorry, reset my brain. Okay, it's back to here, Adafruit, Xbox, yes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Lamore did some initial protocol sniffing, because the sensor that plugs into the Xbox used USB, it plugged in by USB. So she did a little protocol dump and then posted it and said, this looks interesting, someone please figure this out. And then it was reverse engineered by a guy who, who did the whole thing in a few hours and then published it. Security camera system analysis domain facial recognition. Oh, facial recognition. Is this a project that you're working on, Frank? Security camera system with analysis domain facial recognition. Ah, cool. All right. Peter, Peter about 20 minutes ago, 22 minutes. I'm further behind now than I was a few minutes ago. I am running to negative time. Peter said, got to go, have fun everyone. So I've missed you, Peter. I'm sorry. Goodbye. Michael says, a deacon, we used to use MAC addresses of devices to map where in the library people were on a big screen at the entrance so you could find a quiet space easily. That is cool. Slightly creepy, but also cool. I like that one. What that reminds me of is the early days of LinuxConf. At a couple of the early LinuxConfs, there were projectors up in different places. I think there was one projector. I might be misremembering. Probably one projector in the common area, and it was showing an output from Wireshark or something like that. It was just watching the conference network and then showing unencrypted network traffic. So people would be sitting there in the conference, like checking email and all of those sorts of things, and their unencrypted traffic would be thrown up on the screen. I think that, yeah, that's the classic sort of thing that's done at DEF CON and places like that too. Amazon have dog trackers that use GPS, says Dion. And Peter says, I put an Apple tag on my cat, naughty street roaming cat. Yeah. Where are we? Keith wants to know if tracking would be invasion of the dog's privacy. All right, so I am scrolling through quickly. Henrik said, hi, so sad I fell asleep. It was like 2:40 a.m. here, but at least you made it. So Henrik has now sent me a package, which means that sometime in the next few streams, depending on how long the package takes to arrive, I will be able to open his package coming all the way from Estonia, and we will see what there is. So this is a mystery package, and I really like this idea. So if anybody else wants to send me stuff, I'm not going to complain. So Henrik has sent me some things, hopefully something to assemble on a stream, like a kit or something. And he said there is also something that is specific to Estonia. So yeah, that'll be cool. DIY, oh, he made it along. Yep. Michael said there's a new standard being developed in RFC for dealing with tracking and malicious use of AirTags and similar. Where are we? Garage door openers typically don't have much in the way of security, as rolling codes used in automotive applications so are easily cloned or randomly triggered by similar remotes. Oh yes, so this was Rob saying this. Yes, garage doors do have weak source security, which is unfortunate because often they are a way to get directly into a house, which is not good. Where are we? Celtic Beast says, just in case, 11:21 check. Yes, so I am now at a comment that Celtic posted at 11:21. It is now 11:30. So I'm catching up. I'm now 9 minutes behind. Yes. Oh, Celtic Beast says, toxicity of fumes is directly proportional to the material's ease of cut. Is that true? I don't know. Could be. Sounds plausible. Materials ease of cut. I would have thought that the toxicity of the fumes would be based more on the material that is in it. So if you're cutting PVC, for example, which is polyvinyl chloride, one of the side effects of cutting it is that it releases chlorine gas, which is not good. But other things release stuff that is not so bad. Oh, Rob V says, I met a defense lawyer during a telco course that was working at the time on a case where a defense warship had opened multiple garage doors and theft had occurred requiring compensation. What? A defense warship? So are you saying that a ship, as in a big metal thing out at sea, or not so far out at sea, presumably close, was emitting stuff that caused garage doors nearby to open? That is freaky. Yes. I don't even know where to go with that. I want to know more, but I don't even know what questions to ask. Oh, the lane says, I used a driveway sensor and a cell connection to the network to open the door, but didn't get it reliable. Reliability. That is the problem. Okay. Rob V says, I got a flipper. No, Tradie Trev, in response to Rob V, says, I got a flipper 0 and all the garage doors aren't easy to clone. Rolling codes do limit these little hacker devices. Yes, that is reassuring. Got you. Oh, really? Defom just said, it's pretty cool that I can sit here and participate in a chat with the guy that got me started with Arduino in the first place. Well, it's pretty cool that I can sit here and chat with you, Defpom. That is very cool. And see the sorts of things that you are working on. Oh no, because of the diaper button thing earlier. Dodgy says, use diaper in the mail on its way to John. Dodgy asked, how do you prove the ship did that? Oh, and Tradie says, you know they make odor sensors? I found one in a Ventair product and it blew my mind. Yeah, so odor sensors. This is something that I actually experimented with when I was writing Practical Arduino, and I could not make them work. And also, they use a surprising amount of power. Now, this was admittedly 14, 15 years ago, but the sense, in fact, I could probably even find one. I bet that there is one of, I'm looking through under there for my, I had a little container with some random oddball sensors in it that are not ones that I normally use. And things like VOC sensors. And I could not make them work. They have little heaters in them, which is kind of weird. So the whole sensor gets warm, and it looks like a thimble made out of stainless steel mesh, and it's they get warm when they're running. Dion says, Warship probably had a strong signal that overwhelmed the door openers. Yeah, that is kind of worrying, because the door opener, yeah, okay. I'm not going to follow through that train of thought, because it could open all sorts of things, and I want to get onto a couple of things. Austin says, the radios on ships like the Titanic would cause serious havoc on modern systems. Saw a documentary years ago where they were testing rebuilt systems from the Titanic. Yeah, I'm sure they were very noisy. Oh yeah, Henrik is just pointing out that yes, I can track the package. Yeah, David says it's really been 14 or 15 years since Practical Arduino. Well, it just seems like yesterday when I got that book, wired something up and went and bought a replacement Arduino. Yeah, so Practical Arduino came out in 2009 and it is now 2023. And when I'm trying to remember if it came out, I remember that there was an issue with O'Reilly wanting a certain side of the New Year date, and I cannot remember which way they wanted it to be. They were pushing to have it either released just within the year or rolling into the next year, and I can't remember why or what it was. I have a feeling that it was written early 2009 and it was published very late 2009, and they wanted it to be in the 2009 catalog so that it would achieve Christmas pre-sales or something like that. Yeah. Okay, Stephen, thank you. I am just about up to it. Okay. Power chip and robotic chainsaw reminder. Okay, so I'm going to do the robot chainsaw thing first. So the barbecue, the Superhouse barbecue, I am going to do it next Sunday. Before I say this, I'm just going to have a quick look at the calendar. Okay, so next Sunday, the 11th, is the second Sunday of the month, which means I'm going to do another barbecue here at the Super Lab. And everyone who came to the previous one saw the state of the clean room at the time. It is now significantly more developed than that. It is looking really so good now and much more complete. And Dave Paul Jones says, thanks for showing a bit of UPAS. It's 2:35 in the UK, so catch you all soon. Off to bed. Have a good day. Thanks for coming along, and thanks for the UPAS thing. I'm going to watch, I'm going to check out your videos later today. So thank you for providing that. So that's right, barbecue. Next Sunday, starting at about 12:30, because I want to do it so that I finish the live stream and have time to, it's kind of rushing into it. If I finish the live stream around 12 and people are turning up half an hour later, that basically just gives me time to grab a quick drink and get stuff out and roll up the roller door and be ready for people to arrive. So if you're interested in coming along to the barbecue next week, the reason I'm mentioning the barbecue and robots and chainsaws is Lachlan has I think it's a 9 degree of freedom robot arm, like an industrial robot. This is not a little thing that sits on your desk. This is an industrial robot arm with 1.5 meter reach that can do all sorts of complicated things. It's a very nice robot. Who makes it? US Robotics or something? I can't remember. Anyway, it's like a precision industrial robot arm, and he's used it in the past for doing a few different things. It's got different manipulators that he can attach onto it, and he's built like custom fittings that allow him to connect stuff onto the end of it. And he a while ago attached a welder to it, and the robot was welding, so putting together stainless steel enclosures for the things that he makes for his business. They had to make a whole lot of these big stainless steel boxes, and in the past what they would have done is had someone sit there manually with the welder and weld them all together. But what they did was set it up on a jig and train the robot how to do the welding, and then it welded these cases together. And a week or two ago, there is a particular job that he's doing. I'm not quite sure how much he wants me to reveal of this, so I will err on the side of not revealing much at all. There is a particular job that he's doing where he's refurbishing equipment that his company has manufactured in the past. It's equipment that's been out in the field, and now they bring it back in for servicing and refurbishing. And just because of the nature of it, the way the particular equipment works, it has foam for stabilization inside the container, and he needs to be able to cut it all out. You can think of it as, it's not like polystyrene, it's denser than that. It's quite a strong foam, and it turns the thing into a solid block once they put all of this foam in it. And he needs to be able to cut the foam out, but not cut certain things that are inside the foam, so it requires some precision. And the way they've been doing it in the past is doing it by hand, so that you can work your way through using a drill because, yeah, you can't just rip it out like polystyrene. It's much stronger than that. But they would use a drill and a router or whatever, and by hand they would carefully cut this foam out to expose the things that they need to access. He decided to attach a chainsaw to his robot arm and use the chainsaw to cut the foam. Oh, which is one of those things that made me go, wow, there is no way this can go wrong. And so yesterday he was laser cutting the parts for a mounting bracket. He's bought chainsaw parts and include like an extended, I think it's a 700 millimeter long chainsaw, 750 millimeter long chainsaw blade, whatever you call the thing. And he's made, so he's made a mounting bracket that attaches the back end of the chainsaw blade. So there's the stem or whatever you call it that the chain actually runs around. Yesterday he had that bolted onto the end of the robot arm without the chain on it yet. It's just the, or was it on it? No, it's not on it. It's just the straight part of the chainsaw that the chain goes around. So that is bolted onto the end of the robot arm. And the blade, okay, thanks DefPom. So he's got the blade bolted on, not finally yet. This was all just like test fitting. And his goal is to be able to put one of these machines in front of it and run the robot and have the robot use the chainsaw to carve the foam out and expose the parts of the internals of the machine that he then needs to service. So, his goal is to get all of that working this week and to have it working for next Sunday for the barbecue. So, the bar? Oh, Stephen W says, isn't it the bar? Yeah, maybe it is the bar. Yes. There's the chain that runs around it, and then there is the thing that the chain runs around. Maybe, I think that's called the bar. Right. The blade or the bar. And the upshot of all of this is that next Sunday, I suspect we're not going to have the sauce bot next Sunday, which is very sad. I would like to have the sauce bot here, but I can't expect Andrew to turn up every time I have a barbecue with the sauce bot. So until I build one myself, it probably won't be here. But what hopefully we will have is a robot with a chainsaw attached to it. Cable tie, you made it. So I was just telling all the good folks that for the barbecue next Sunday, there should be Lachlan's 9 Degree of Freedom industrial robot arm with a chainsaw on the end. And it's going to, Henrik says, hire a human sauce bot. Yeah, someone to stand there and go beep beep. All right. Yes, Cable Tie says it's a lovely day for riding outside in the Nongs today. Yeah, it was. Yes. So next Sunday, 12:30 at the Super Lab. If you need details, please check check Discord. There is a Super Lab barbecue channel specifically in it. And Amanda, thank you for pointing that out. Aaron says, Aussie Health and Safety Police, doing your own home electrics? No, no, no. But attaching a chainsaw to a robot arm? Yeah, that's fine. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I don't even know how we're going to deal with safety with this sort of thing. But yeah, I think Lachlan's plan is to have it running for the barbecue, and so you can actually see it running its chainsaw and waving it around in the air. Well, maybe not waving it around in the air, but we'll have a block of foam or something like that and get the chainsaw to carve it. So, yeah, David Crisp says safety is a guideline only. Yeah, remember kids, safety third. So we're all going to have to engage our safety squints and keep our remaining limbs out of the range of reach of the robot with the chainsaw attached to it. Yes. Stephen says, just don't have the chainsaw running to mildly improve safety. Oh. All right. Trady says, replying to Aaron, I trust most of you lot to do decent home electrics, but the crap I come across is a reason why it's a licensed trade. Yeah. Amanda says, get him to carve a squirrel. Yeah, like ice carving. Because ice carving, I think, is typically done with a chainsaw, isn't it? I think a lot of it is. So, yeah, how cool would that be? We could get a big block of ice. How do you even get a block of ice big enough for ice carving? Do you go out and buy like a cubic meter of ice, which of course would weigh about a ton and would need a forklift to move? How did... Yeah, this is what you're seeing right now is the squirrel brain in action. It went from chainsaw on a robot arm to carving to ice carving to how do you make a big block of ice. Haven't seen any squirrels this stream. Oh, yeah, here's Steve. Here's Steph. At least you've seen them now. Oh, David Crisp said another YouTuber made a carving chainsaw a couple of years ago. Can't remember who. Tip of the tongue. Okay, so yeah, Dodgy says, wouldn't it weigh over a ton? Yes, it would. Oh, would it? No, it would weigh under a ton. If you had a cubic meter of ice, it would be under a ton because the specific gravity of water at room temperature is 1.0. So 1 cubic meter of water weighs 1 ton. But to make 1 cubic meter of ice, you start with less than a cubic meter of water because it then expands. So it would be lighter than a ton. Scott says go down to the lake and cut a block. Big freezer. Get a chest freezer and fill it with water and wait a long time. Yeah, it would take a long time. Amanda said just use wood. That would make a mess. That would make a mess. In Melbourne at the moment, the carving would last until, at least until the July barbecue, yeah. Henrik says, look in Discord. I will, but not right at this second. I will check it out later. What was I looking at? Okay, so that was one thing. The important thing. Also, if you can't get on Discord, that's right, I was going to put the link to Discord in here. Please excuse me while I type for a second. And if you want to... Oh yeah, so that's the one, Stuff Made Here. So it was Stuff Made Here who did the video about the carving robot. I've just typed this link out. I didn't copy and paste it, so I don't even know if it's correct. But that is the link to Discord. There is a... that is a... oh, Dodgy says, I thought ice contracted, not expands. That is an interesting thing. Yeah, because normally when you freeze things... Okay, so freezing something is decreasing its temperature, which means that all of the atoms move closer together and it forms some kind of, typically, like in the case of steel, for example, when it gets colder, it shrinks. When you heat it, it expands. So logic would say that when you freeze water, it shrinks, but it actually doesn't. When you freeze water, it expands. And I think that is because it goes through a state transition where it forms a crystalline structure. But I could be wrong. I am probably totally wrong. Oh, Henrik says, I've sent you the robotic chainsaw video in Messenger. Cool. Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, Celtic Beast says, water is one of the few common substances where the solid is less dense than its liquid form. Right. Yeah, it is to do with the crystallization. Okay, cool. I was on the right track. Thanks, DefPom. Water is densest at 4 degrees Celsius. Oh, the lane says tree trimming. Yes. Yes. So, the other thing, okay, I don't have all that much longer left. We're heading towards the 12 o'clock thing. All right, wrapping up the thought of the barbecue. If you are in Melbourne and you would like to come to the barbecue next Sunday here at the Super Lab and check out the cleanish room, the progress on it, and come and say hello, maybe bring a project if you feel like it. If you've got something for a show and tell, that would be really cool. Jump into Discord in that link that I posted and have a look in the Super Lab barbecue channel. All the information will be there, including the address for people who want to physically turn up. I'm not going to just give the address here publicly. I probably could, but I'm just being slightly circumspect about that. If you can't get into Discord for some reason, then you can email me directly. My personal email account is the best one. It's John, Jon, @oxer.com.au. And the fact that I have said that now probably means that automated transcription services, like for subtitles, will now put that into the text, and then it already gets all the spam filtering. I already get so many emails. I think I haven't looked for a little while. I think I have currently in the region of 50 to 60,000 unread emails across my various accounts. Yes. So, yeah, if you can't get into Discord and you want the address, email me. That's the way to do it. Now, the other thing, the last little thing is where is it? I had the LM. Here we go. Okay, now this is a special thing that might be of interest to Austin and other people who do power over Ethernet type stuff. For a while I have been looking for a switch mode regulator to use as like my just go-to sort of thing. And based on Austin's recommendations, I've done, where was it? The LM29, 2576. I have used this a couple of times. I'm just going to, yeah, the HV version. So there is a project that I'm doing at the moment. This is the mind-blowing project that, oh yeah, Austin says, the only problem I can see off the bat is a 1 amp limit. Yeah, for most things though, that's okay. So input voltage range, 4.2 to 80 volts. So this is what really got my attention. This is probably too small for anybody to read. Let's try this. Okay, LMR 30, I think the way you're meant to read it is 38010 because it's 3 volts and up output voltage, 80 volts max input, and 1.0 amps continuous current. And it has a few interesting things. First, it's really small. Like where are we? It's a SOIC basically. So the whole thing is tiny. All right, these are the good things. Stephen W says it has sync input, so you can probably run them in parallel with a common clock source. Yeah. So the 1 amp current limit so far is the only thing that I can see that is a problem with this, potentially for some applications. But get this, 80 volts max input. That means that you can use this for powering from PoE and have plenty of headroom, which is really nice. It has an adjustable output voltage, so you can set it to 3.3 volts output or 5 volt or whatever you need, or 12 volts. Very low quiescent current. Adjustable switching frequency, which means that you can use an inductor to suit your particular needs. The example circuit in here uses a 400 kilohertz switching frequency. You can synchronize that to an external clock if you wanted to. This is cool. It's got a spread spectrum option for reduced EMI, where it is spreading its PWM sort of thing and not having such big spikes. Oh yeah, this one is also useful. Supporting a startup with a pre-biased output. So that's being able to start under load and in different situations. Integrated synchronous rectification, internal compensation. Now, the cool thing about this is that this chip in single quantities sells for about $1, which is ridiculous. That is so good. So basically $1 for the voltage regulator, and then you need an inductor, which can be reasonably small and not particularly expensive. I have just designed this into a project, and I already have them. So I ordered some of the 38010s. How am I going to say this? 38010. The LMR 38010. I've ordered some. I got them from DigiKey, and they're right here. In fact, I think they're on the bench beside me somewhere. It'll be in one of these bags. Oh, and inductors. No, that's crystals. What have I got here? That is sensors. Simple switcher. Here it is. Here's a bag of them. So this is a bag of those LMR 38010s. And the inductors are here somewhere as well, in one of these other bags. Right, somewhere. The PCBs for that project are currently on an aeroplane heading to me, so fairly soon I'll be able to assemble my first circuit that uses one of these and see what it is like. But I'm pretty excited about this because this is a way of, like, this part, what I'm going to be using this for is replacing an automotive grade 7805. So the classic 7805 linear regulator that has been around for decades is available in a few different versions. In different cases, you can get tiny little TA220 type cases. Tiny? Which one is that? I can't remember. Yeah, you can get it in different style of enclosure with different current ratings and with different maximum input voltages. One that I have used a large number of over the years, the sorry, I just got distracted by a comment. Yeah, so I have used over the years hundreds, maybe probably thousands of the automotive version of the 7805 to give 5 volts output on connected to a car's 12 volt electrical system, or to a truck 24 volt electrical system. And they work okay, but they do have some problems. They have some susceptibility issues to noise, and also they don't have an input range which is high enough to deal with things like PoE, and you wouldn't want to use a linear regulator for that anyway. So I've been looking around for a switch mode regulator that I can use as my go-to replacement for the classic 7805. And this, so a SOIC 8 footprint, what have we got? We've got that, plus a little inductor, which is tiny. So the inductor that I've spec'd on this design is 5mm by 5mm. It's quite small. So the inductor plus the chip and a couple of supporting parts. It needs a couple of resistors for the feedback circuit and for the voltage sensing, so you can set the voltage you want on the output. All of that, the footprint of that on a PCB is kind of the same as a 7805 that is sitting flat on the board. So when you can put a 7805 voltage regulator vertically so that it's taking up very small space on the board, just the 3 pins going in. But what I normally do is lay it flat on the board so that the ground tab on it, which is the thermal ground, can connect to the ground plane of the PCB and then use the PCB as the heatsink. And when you do that, it takes up a fair bit of space on the PCB. So the LMR 38010 plus the inductor is about the same size as a 7805, but it gives you 80 volts max input. It gives you the 1 amp output, which is about what you can get typically out of a 7805 before they start getting stinking hot. And it's far more efficient. And it's probably going to end up cheaper than a 7805. Yeah, so DefPom says way better for thermals though using a buck system. Yes. All right. Yeah, Tradie Trev says the specs look sick. Yeah. Oh, Amanda, lunchtime here. See you next week. Yes, it's lunchtime for me too. I really should be stopping. Dodgy asked, have you ever estimated the cost of the electronics you own? I don't know. No. Well, the short answer is no, I haven't estimated the cost of the electronics I own. I'm not even quite sure what you mean by that question. Are you talking about all of the things I've bought over the years? And how would you even classify it? For example, would you consider a pick and place machine to be electronics that I own? Yeah, and there's this crossover between things that I buy to use, things that I buy for R&D, and things that I buy which are like cost of sales. It's parts that go into things that I'm making for other people. So, yeah, Stephen says, would be very nice to see voltage and ripple compared to the 7805. Yeah, one of the major reasons that I'm looking at this is I want better noise immunity. And, Dodgy said, no, the chips and bits and pieces must be in the tens of thousands. Yeah, if it's chips and things that I bought to put into products to sell, it would be more than the tens of thousands. Yeah. If you consider all of the parts that Freetronics has bought over the years doing production runs, it would be a lot. I bet enough value in components alone to buy a nice car. Well, yeah, if you are talking about components that have been bought for production runs for Freetronics as well, like everything that has ever been made of stuff that I've designed, then it would be in the 7 figures region. Because it was in the multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars per year for quite some years. Oh, just what's currently in the lab? I don't know. Oh, Henrik, is my comments appearing? Yes. It was just a different subject that I wasn't yet talking about. Yeah, I just want to wrap up this thing about the simple switcher, and then I do need to go, because Plasma Steve is going to come over to talk about 3D printers. So I'm excited about this. Oh, and the other thing is that because this is a relatively new, so this whole thing, look at this. This data sheet came out January 2022. This is a relatively new part, and so it's basically the current generation kind of state of the art as switch mode regulators go. So it's small, it's got all the good features, It's super cheap and it's available. If you look on Octopart, there are 3 different variants of this, depending on whether it has spread spectrum support and those sorts of things. But across those 3 different variants, there's, I think there's something like 100,000 units in stock. So easy to get. Cool. Okay. Where are we? All right. I will just look at a couple of comments before I go. So Henrik was asking. Henrik said, I asked because have you ever seen a 5 amp Hercron switch? What is a Hercron switch? Hercron switch. I don't even know what that is. I'm gonna Hercron switch. Hercron. Is that like a reed switch? I haven't heard that terminology before. Hercron. So I'm curious to know what that is. A 5 amp. So normally, if by Hercron switch you mean a reed switch, yeah, okay, cool. So Henrik said yes, reed switch, I guess. Yeah, there are probably different terminologies. The magnetic switch. No, I haven't, and the reason is, okay, so Henrik's question is, have I seen a reed switch that'll do 5 amps? Reed switch. And I don't think you will find one because of the way reed switches work. I'm going to bring this up here. The way they work is they rely on having a very, very small contact. In fact, if we go to reed switch here, and the diagram of how they work, this one, maybe this will do. So the contacts on them have to be incredibly small because the way they work is that they deflect part of the contact when a magnetic field is introduced. So the 2 parts of the switch are apart normally, and then one of them will be in a fixed position, or they might both move. Now, I think one of them is fixed position, and when a magnetic field is introduced, one of them moves and is pulled and touches the other one and then releases. And that can only work if the contact is small enough and flexible enough to be able to move in the presence of that magnetic field. And a switch that is capable of switching 5 amps of current, which is a lot of current at any voltage, even at low voltage, it's a lot of current, needs a very big contact area and quite large. So the whole switch, in theory, you could build a reed switch or a switch that works on reed switch type principles that could carry 5 amps of current, but it would be physically really big and you would need a really, really strong magnetic field to make it snap. Basically, it's like half a relay. A reed switch is like part of a relay. So I haven't seen, oh really? I'm in the process of saying no, it's not possible, and Henrik says, one spoiler alert, I've sent you a 5 amp reed switch. That is going to be fascinating. I want to see how that works. I wonder if it's like a multi-stage switch where it uses the detection part to trigger a higher current contact. Very, very interesting. Defbomb says, I've seen 200 milliamp reeds fail to turn off again from the inrush current peaking up to 1 amp or so. The magnetics lock them on until the power is turned off. I did a video on it. Okay, now I'm going. All right, Defbomb is has done a video about reed switches. That's interesting. I've got to check that one out as well. All right, I have got to go as well. Oh, Henrik says, yes, it's a bit big, but it works. Yeah, that is interesting. Okay. My normal approach with that sort of thing would be to use low voltage sensing to switch something that then switches the load. But if it's all integrated into a single thing, that is definitely going to be worth looking at. That's a cool thing for a stream. So thanks for including that in the package. I'm looking forward to checking that out. Yeah. Yes. All right. I am going to go. So remember, next Sunday, 12:30, here at the Super Lab barbecue. Please come along if you can. Yeah, I won't do any spoiler picks, Henrik. I will wait until I'm on a live stream, and I will open your package on a live stream so that everybody can get to see what's in it as well. Okay. Thank you for coming along on this sleep-deprived Sunday. I hope you're all having a fantastic weekend. I hope to see some of you next weekend. And if you're coming along and you feel like bringing a project for show and tell, that would be cool. If you want to bring body armor and stay well away from the reach of the chainsaw wielding robot, that's all right. Oh, okay, so Henrik won't send any. Chip says, Immy and Crispy are intending to be there next week. Cool, making the big trip from Ballarat. So I will see some of you on the stream next week, some of you in person next week, and I hope all of you are having a great time. And now, go and build something cool.